said, you killed our brothers in Syria, and now we're here.
Je suis Paris, a shocked world embraces a wounded France. Darkness in the city of light, and outrage builds over the terrorist attacks. What comes next?
Civil Rights Era 2.0, South Florida students advance the national conversation about race on campus.
This cannot be an American fight, although American leadership is essential.
Free speech on campus and safe spaces, are they compatible? Plus new twists like her comments last night in the race for the White House. We will take it all to the roundtable.
Good Sunday morning and welcome on a weekend that horror and heartache and the politics of violence lead the news and certainly frame our conversations.
And that is where we begin this morning with the latest on the horrific deadly attacks in Paris on Friday. In France today, police have found a second car used in those attacks, and French media are reporting 3 Kalashnikov assault rifles were found in that car. This follows the arrest of several people in Belgium and Brussels who may have connections to the Paris attacks. 129 people were killed, more than 350 wounded, and 99 of the wounded are in critical condition. ISIS has taken credit for those attacks. They were merciless and relentless. 7 jihadists firing repeatedly into crowds of people at restaurants, a concert hall, and outside a soccer stadium. A car used by some of the attackers has been recovered outside Paris.
This morning, we have Mark Rosenberg with us. He is president of Florida International University, and he's here on double duty this morning for us. Most of President Rosenberg's academic career has been in international studies and foreign relations. He's lived in Paris and right now has FIU students studying abroad there. Good morning, President Rosenberg.
President Rosenberg, Mark, great to have you come in.
Thank you.
We should, I think, intellectually, we are not shocked by what we saw Friday in Paris, but emotionally, I think we are all shocked by the violence, the cruelty, the brutality, and the extent of the carnage.
Well, Michael, first of all, our condolences to the French people, our condolences to all those who were victims and their families. We hurt for them. We may not be surprised, but we should be disappointed. And we have to find ways to find some silver linings in this. First of all, the Muslim community in this country is coming out and making some powerful statements about its dissociation with these horrific acts. And there may be an alliance now among countries that are quarreling to focus on the national security threat that we all face.
It may, in fact, bring some warring parties, as it were metaphorically, bring them together to fight ISIS.
That's correct.
You know, we're watching what's going on there after the Charlie Hebdo attacks earlier this year. Certainly ISIS and Syria has been, the world is on alert on what's going on there. But why Paris? Why do they keep focusing on Paris?
Well, Paris is an international city. In many ways, it always has been. It's a mecca for individuals wanting to express themselves. It's a wide open community. The French have been very permissive historically in civil liberties, and so it really is a testing ground. And now we see the true extent to which the tests go too far.
Yeah, but Mark, you well know, you are a student of political science and a great one. The term chauvinism comes from Monsieur Chauvin in France. I mean, it is extreme nationalism, and over the last, 2 decades or so, there's a huge debate in France where conservatives and even some liberal French people are saying to the Muslim community that lives there, and there's a large Islamic community, you can't wear headscarves, women, you can't cover your face, you've got to observe French culture and tradition, and this has exacerbated tensions there.
There's no question about that. French national identity is very strong, and it's certainly being challenged by the presence of new groups there.
Yeah. You know, I know you have spent, Glenna and I, so many of our friends have spent time in Paris. I have been in that neighborhood where the restaurants were that were attacked. And I mean, your heart goes out to the the victims and to the whole city when you think about men with Kalashnikovs and other weapons just coming in and randomly shooting people to death.
Michael, in the 21st century, the nature of terrorism is exactly that, to shock, to amaze, and certainly whoever perpetrated this, ISIS, that was their goal, and they accomplished it.
Yeah, one of the things that we all know about the new Western Europe, they have a common currency, the euro, and they have done away with border crossings. Now, what we have seen over the last 24 hours are French police going up to Brussels, which is only, what, an hour and a half on the train, because there is a radical jihadist community there that they believe is responsible. I guess my question is, do the people of Europe, I mean, do all of us have to kind of rethink borders and how we control our borders?
I think there's no question about that. The borderless Europe comes out of the dreams of the 40s and 50s, the European coal and steel community. It's a result of a very deliberate process. A process that obviously didn't take into account the kind of threats that could emanate from people freely flowing across.
I was in Europe a week and a half ago, crossing borders with such ease, and we had conversations about that in my family about how easy it is to go from one country to the next. Now this morning we learned that CNN is reporting at least one of the terrorists, one of the ones who blew himself up, came into the country through Greece, through one of the Greek islands, among the Syrian refugees, desperate people coming to Europe for help. And if this is the case, boy, that is a game changer for what's occurring right now. How do you take in desperate, hurting families when terrorists plant themselves among them?
Well, there really are not good solutions or good answers right now. We have to do a lot better job at understanding human behavior in the 21st century, and that policies have consequences, and there will be negative unintended consequences of those same policies. The deterioration in the Middle East, in Syria, logically was going to lead to this. We seem to have been caught flat-footed.
We indeed were caught flat-footed. Mark, we know that there are registered, I think, 28,000 or so French citizens who live in South Florida, maybe another 75,000. And they are represented here by a consul general. His name is Philippe Letriat. I know that you spoke with him yesterday. What did he say?
I called to express our condolences and to let the consul know about the FIU presence, because we're very concerned about our students. We have 2 students in Paris. We have 4 or 5 in the rest of France, and 50 students studying from France here. We know that there probably will be hardships on them. He was distraught and clearly not in a mood to have a lengthy conversation, I just wanted to manifest our support for them and any help that we could provide.
How are the students? Have you been in touch with them and their families?
Yes. Well, I'm happy to tell you that our 2 students are safe, the 2 students studying in Paris. I talked to the families of both of the students on Friday night and Saturday morning. They've been in contact with their children. They're comfortable right now at their safety. But this is a day-by-day thing, and we're watching it very closely.
I think that's going to be much harder on the parents in the next couple of days than it is on them.
No question.
And you say that as a mother whose daughter is studying abroad.
Yes.
Yeah, we understand.
Yes.
Well, we speak with you and join with you in our condolences, our heartbreak for the people of Paris and for the people of France. Country I love. I'm something of a Francophile, and I think we all feel pain this morning. Nous sommes Parisiens. We are together in that.
Thanks so much.
Mark Rosenberg, stick with us here. We're going to move on to another topic where we need your expertise.
This week, in fact, students brought home the spotlight right here to South Florida about campus racial issues that have been raised in Missouri, and 2 of them join President Rosenberg for some frank talk about that when we come right back. This week, students at South Florida universities rallied in solidarity with those at the University of Missouri.
Which happens to be my alma mater, and that is where long simmering anger over bigotry and racism came to a boiling point this past week. The university president was forced to resign, but the questions raised at Mizzou are echoing on campuses in South Florida and across the country.
Student leaders and administrators are working to understand and resolve those issues right now, and some of them join us right here today.
Again, FIU President Mark Rosenberg is back, actively working with students on diversity and civil rights issues on his campuses. Ernest Tayon Anderson is the president of the Black Student Union at FIU. We welcome him. And Camille Gale is president of FIU's Council on Student Organizations. She has explained to me it's an umbrella group for hundreds of students involved on campus.
Good morning. And I should say, Ernest was playing in church this morning and made it like this, and we're so grateful that you're here today. And I should say that we met on Friday when we were doing this piece with the president on the FIU campus. And what struck me most interesting was two student leaders here. Ernest, let's start with you. As a president of Black Student Union, I'm sure people go to you as the voice of students on campus. And you were telling me that even though South Florida is not Missouri, it's a much more diverse and somewhat accepting place in many ways, you feel discriminated against in very subtle ways. Talk about that for us.
Well, at FIU, like you said before, no, it's not the same type of oppression that we experience. It's not overt racism, but however, we do experience microaggressions in different ways on FIU's campus. And those are some of the things that we brought to President Rosenberg's attention. As you stated, I am the voice of the black students on campus, and in my position, I have to take the concerns of the students to the administration and speak for them. So,
well, and I'm sure you've got a willing ear. I'm sure Dr. Rosenberg is not saying, okay, yeah, I hear you. I mean, he's doing something about it.
Yes, well, we've made strides towards moving forward on some of our concerns. We've had several meetings with different levels of administration, all the way up to the top, and we've been seeing some of our concerns actually being met.
Yeah.
Mark Rosenberg, you taught me the term microaggression,
Right.
which was actually coined in the 70s, I've learned.
Yes.
Talk about what is a microaggression and why that's so subtle and scary, because people don't even know they're doing it.
Well, what's happening is that the civil rights, social justice issues that were prevalent in the 70s are returning, but now they're focused more on individual issues and individual concerns. And I think it's appropriate. And what that a microaggression is when a comment is made to someone, and it's an innocent comment, but they may feel that it's uncomfortable as a consequence of that comment. They may feel uncomfortable because they feel that they're not getting the respect that they deserve in general terms, or that there have been specific issues that have not been focused upon. And so, for instance, something as innocent as "where are you from" can be perceived by an individual as a microaggression.
I mean, for example, I know, Camille, you told me your family is from the Tampa area. If you were from here and you said to another student, oh, I'm from Liberty City or Overtown, which are poor black neighborhoods, there could be some pejorative connotation. I mean, there could be a downside for some white students who would then make assumptions. Is that the kind of microaggressions we're talking about?
Definitely. It would definitely be from where you come from. I think that's in a topic at FIU because of our diverse community. A lot of Black Americans can be seen as a different culture. So, for instance, there's a lot of Caribbeans. There's a lot of Caribbeans at FIU's community. So, for Caribbeans, if you just approach them as if they were, a Black American from Liberty City or Overtown, it's going to be taken the wrong way.
They want to be acknowledged for their Jamaican roots or Dominican or wherever they're from.
And I think that's a huge issue at FIU, is a lot of people aren't up to date or have a lot of knowledge on the backgrounds of different African Americans. So that microaggression could definitely play a role in that.
Indeed, in terms of the diversity of our campus, it really is Africa diaspora in some respects, because one of our students who comes from Haiti may not necessarily identify with the experience, with the so-called American experience, such as it is. They have a different ID. And so we have to do better. We have to do better at being sensitive to that incredible diversity.
You know, the news, the video, the protests coming out of Missouri this week, I think the nation is starting to understand that once again in Missouri, this is not something that just happened. This is a long, simmering, subtle issue that exploded. The straw that broke the camel's back just kind of brought it to the light. Ernest, are you surprised at what you saw in Missouri?
Well, I wasn't surprised. It's racism today in today's society.
So by saying you're not surprised, are you saying you can relate and this may be something that happens around the country?
Definitely.
Or is that a Missouri-specific problem?
No, I know it's not. Like as I read through the articles, because you know, as a college student, we're going to hear these things and see it on social media. So I read the articles and I watched the video, and seeing the expressions on those protesters' face, it hit a spot, and that's pretty much what I know. That's what sparked me to want to gain more knowledge on the situations, and I know that's what sparked basically the flame that's starting to go around the campuses across the country, because it's a lot of new incidents that's coming up now on different campuses where they're bringing things up to the forefront.
Camille, let me ask you, one of the things they asked for black students at the University of Missouri, is a safe space. Now, is that something that's important to you, and how would you define a safe space?
It's important. However, on our campus, I feel our percentage of black students are so proud that they would turn anywhere into a safe space. They would take it upon themselves to make themselves safe. They're very active in the community and being activists for black Americans and college students all around. So safe space, I don't feel it would be important on our campus. However, I could see on a predominantly white campus as Missouri that would be something that they would
But
need.
let me see if I could translate that just for a second.
Please.
One of the incredible elements of our discussion is one of the issues that is of concern to the BSU is to have the library open 24 hours. Why? I mean, let's have that conversation about why and why that's so important. And that would be an example to me of us doing better at having safe space.
So the Black Student Union has come to you and said, keep the library open, please?
And here's I think you should try to answer the question as to why that would be important.
So on our campus, we're about 13% black that identify with being black, or students from the African diaspora. So that accounts for somewhere around 7,000 plus. And on campus that actually live on living housing, it's about 64% that live on housing. So the students that live in housing normally get, an on-campus job, and they may stay to work, really late, get off of work at 1 o'clock or something. The library closes at 1, and those hours 1 a.m. And those hours between 1 a.m. and 8 a.m. where the library is closed is very crucial, because we're student leaders. Half of my e-board actually works on campus, and we have a hard time with getting our studies done, because throughout the day we're trying to program and plan for the students and creating spaces for them to talk about the issues that we find very concerning to us in our culture. But when it comes down to the evening where we would do our homework and study, there's nowhere to go. There's no 24-hour computer labs or anywhere like that. So that was one of our concerns. It may not seem like it's something that can benefit to my immediate crowd, but since they are taking up so much space on that campus, since we do make up that amount of the percentage that lives in housing,
practical
it makes sense for us that we would be in direct benefit from a 24-hour library.
Stay right there. We'll come back. I want to know when you sleep. That's another story. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come right back.
On on to Sunday Morning Live in our studio, and this week in South Florida, we are talking about the state of campuses and racism, free speech, and Camille Gale, you are a student journalist at FIU, and I will predict that you will have a successful career. Let me ask you, at the University of Missouri, where I went to school, they have a great journalism school, and during the protest, I don't know if you've seen the video, we can run some of it again, the concerned student in 1950, the students who were protesting the racism, bigotry, were camped out on a student quad for several days. And when some journalists from the journalism school and other journalists went out there to photograph them, try to speak with them, they were prevented from getting close to them on a couple of occasions by other students who said, "You don't have the right to be here." And the journalist said, "We have as much right to be here as you do." I mean, society has the clashes of values and constitutional rights all the time, but as a aspiring journalist, does that bother you that photographers, reporters were prevented from getting close to these students who were protesting?
It does. It bothers me a lot. Granted, it could be if, you know, the reporter or the photographer was of the opposite race, that could play a role. The students who are
the photographer in this case was an Asian American young man.
Right. So then that could play a role because the protesters are on the defense at the moment. I feel that in that case, it should be told from two perspectives. So we could have a journalism student of African American race and someone of, you know, the white American race to tell the story, because I think that speaks a lot of volumes. That could show, you know, the difference in the campus and the diversity and how people are interpreting it. For me, I would love to get that story. That would be a great story to tell.
It was a national story.
What would you have done if you, as a student journalist, were barred from practicing your free speech, from getting that story on that campus?
I would do whatever I could to get that story. I would put the microphone down, the cameras down, talk to them as a student leader, just someone who's concerned, and just let them know that this story does need to be heard, and there's a way to do it, and no other person could tell it better than another student.
President Rosenberg, should there have been resignations at the top? How do you frame the resignations of the president of the University of Missouri? Was that an appropriate move?
The president had opportunities to be responsive, and he missed those opportunities. When you're a leader of an institution, you cannot be tone deaf, and you got to be willing to go to people on their terms. Got to be willing to go to the students on their terms and grapple with that. Students want respect. People want respect, and the students were not getting the respect they felt they deserved, and I regret that, but I think it was appropriate.
Yeah, Ernest, let me ask you, I think the denouement, the end of this situation at the University of Missouri with the resignation of the president, the chancellor at the campus in Columbia, would not have happened if the football team, most of the members of the football team, had not come forward and said, "We're not playing in next week's game if the president doesn't resign." That's kind of, I think, a dramatic moment for student athletes to have made the difference, isn't it?
Yes, most definitely. With what we're doing on our campus, I would say that it's challenging to get your sell point across. So you have to convince them that this issue affects them. And I believe what I read from that story was that the football team actually knew the person that ended up going on the hunger strike.
Yeah.
And they felt like he was just gonna, like he was gonna really harm himself from doing that. So they joined in solidarity with him. And things like that, unfortunately, it takes for something to hit close to home for it to gain more power behind it, and getting the support of a big organization like a football team on the campus, like that's huge. And for something like that to happen, and the end result is exactly what you wanted, or one of the things that you wanted, that just speaks volumes.
It's like getting a celebrity to join your cause.
Right.
Make people know. Can I take this in just a little bit of a different direction, President? There are many, many Muslim students on the campus of FIU.
Yes.
Let me just frame this in a what is, if any, your concerns in light of the Paris attacks on any sort of possible backlash or discriminatory action against people who are Muslim, and many are obviously Muslim by their clothing on your campuses?
Well, my first concern is student safety and security for all students, and we spend a lot of time on that. We have significant conversations with our Muslim student community. In fact, they know that we have an effort now to build a Muslim research center at the institution, so we can have better information and more information. I do not have any specific concerns today, but we're listening very carefully. But student safety comes first.
All right, Mark Rosenberg,
yes.
Great to have you come in.
Thank you,
Camille
sir.
Gale,
Thanks so
nice to meet you. Good luck with your
Great to
career.
have you.
Thank you.
Ernest Anderson,
Thank you
you
so
as
much.
well. All right, stay with us when we come back. Race relations, the politics of terror, the candidates debate. Well, we've got a lot to talk about with the roundtable.
Chop chop. Stay tuned. Roundtable is next. Politics shape events, events shape politics, and this week may be game-changing on so many fronts. A lot on the plate for today's roundtable, so let's get right to the introductions.
Kitty Fang is an attorney in Miami, partner with Berger Singerman, former prosecutor in both Miami-Dade and Broward, and you see her sometimes on Fox News with Greta Van Susteren. Mark Caputo is the Florida correspondent for Politico, a leading website, and he is the author-writer of the daily Politico Florida Playbook, which is must-reading for political junkies like me. Tiffany Lee is an attorney and partner with Holland and Knight, and she co-chairs that distinguished firm's Diversity Council.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
You know, in a somber mood we have today for many reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tiffany, can we start with you after this discussion our last segment? What I found so interesting, my learning experience in the past couple of days has been this microaggression issue. And that tells me that there's not only shades of racism, but there are perceptions of racism where there may not be. And both can be devastating.
I think that's absolutely right. In the wake of what happened in Missouri, I actually have 4 nephews and a niece who are all college age. And I reached out to them and I said, well, how do you feel about what's going on? You know, this is happening they're in school in North Carolina and New Orleans. And my oldest nephew, that was the term he used. He goes, this is an example of the microaggressions that we experience on a day-to-day basis on college campuses. So that, I think if you're an administrator at a college or university and you're not paying attention to the subtlety of that and how that perception can drive what happens. I mean, that's what we saw. The football players got involved because they perceived there to have been a series of incidents that were not addressed. They perceived there to have been a series of microaggressions that were not responded to. And if you're an administrator and you don't take a lesson from that, you've missed an opportunity.
But as Mark Rosenberg said, it appears the guy who was the president at MU was tone deaf and didn't pay much attention. Kitty Fang, you are a proud alumna of Yale University.
I am.
And there was a really pretty outrageous event in its own right that happened this week involving free speech and debate on campuses. Explain what happened with this couple who are lecturers at the university, and the woman wrote a memo, did she not, that simply said, you can't be quite so offended, you've got to kind of toughen up here when people say or do things that you don't agree with.
It's unfortunate that you end up having something, you know, articulated in that way, because as Tiffany just said, there's these opportunities to have a dialogue that could really be eye-opening. The disagreement I have with what's happening and what happened at Yale is that there's this idea that there's institutional systemic racism. Do I think it exists? Yes, I do, but I don't think that you can necessarily brand an entire university or an entire educational institution with that phraseology. For example, at Yale, there was a very unfortunate incident that happened with a fraternity on campus when it turned away a woman of color from entering the party. I don't think that's necessarily symbolic of what Yale University stands for. I am an Asian American female. I attended the university, and I did not experience any racism when I was there. Doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and I went a long time ago, but I find that it's now stimulated dialogue and conversation that maybe didn't exist, but we have to be careful. We all have to be careful on both sides that we don't impute it, broadly stroked against an entire university, and then we don't ignore it as a chancellor or a university president could possibly do.
Aren't universities just reflections of the communities that they're in? And to your point, a conversation, be it on the university campus or on, like we have right here, in the community at large, is critical in understanding. South Florida is not Missouri. And we saw that with Michael Brown a couple, what was that, a year ago? Time is sort of elastic for me these days. But, and we talked about it then. South Florida is not Missouri. South Florida's leadership and hierarchy are not Missouri. And so what are the lessons we take from that, politically speaking?
Yeah, boy, this is dicey for me to comment on.
Go for it.
Well,
it's the round table.
In the end, I think.
Shy. Come on.
Well, I actually do think that yes, it's true. It's unfair to brand our system as institutionally racist, but when you step back and look at it, my wife teaches in a Title I school in Coconut Grove, and the challenges these children face before they set foot in that classroom is striking and stunning compared to my white children. And in the end, it's difficult for me to step back and look and say, the deck is not stacked against you if you're black, because in many segments of this community and in this nation, it is.
Isn't that a poverty issue, though, rather than a skin color issue?
Well, it is a poverty issue rather than a skin color issue, but in a nation that initially had a constitution where blacks generally were slaves, and they were therefore 3/5 of a human being, there was a close association between one's skin color and one's wealth and one's worth. And if we believe that the success of a generation depends on the success of its forebears, it's difficult for me to ignore the fact that this initially existed in our society from the beginning of the founding of the United States of America. And I don't think that we've handled it properly. I don't know how we do it. I do agree we should talk about it and we shouldn't be so offended about it. But at the same time, I do understand why people on both sides do get offended about it.
But what we have in South Florida is really a tremendous socioeconomic divide. It's not so much about the color of your skin, but what is your access to resources? What is your access to opportunities? And it's often driven by socioeconomic opportunity. Now, I do think there are some unfortunate correlations and parallels where you see certain populations of color who are less advantaged, but it's an economic challenge that we're facing, not just here, but across the nation.
Well, and forgive me, Tiffany, and I think that kind of segues into, I think, perhaps one of the most important issues beyond national security, and that is what is called income inequality, disparity in incomes, because that addresses exactly what we are talking about, doesn't it? And we expect the presidential candidates to address that, although at the meeting that you and I went to in Orlando, Mark, I did not hear.
You didn't hear it at the Sunshine Summit?
Well, newsflash, the majority of the Republican Party, I think about 6% tops of the Republican Party of Florida, its membership is African American. The black population of Florida is, what, 15, 16, 17%. So, you know, the Republican Party of Florida doesn't necessarily represent the racial diversity and ethnic diversity of the state. So you're not going to hear them talk to their base about something that's not as important to them.
Well, I understand. What they talked a lot about was immigration, and frankly, we're pretty xenophobic when it came to immigration. But let's take a break and let's come back. And want to hear Roundtabler's reaction to that. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We are here with our roundtable on Sunday morning. Mark Caputo from Politico, Tiffany Lee from Holland and Knight, and Katie Fang, the one and only from Berger Singerman. Katie, let me ask you your opinion about this. Mark and I both attended the Sunshine Summit in Orlando Thursday, Friday, Saturday, where all, I think, 13, 14 presidential candidates got up and spoke. Yes. And some of them, they seem to be trying to out-duel each other on who can be toughest on immigration. And immigration, Lord knows, is a big subject and it's important.
Huge. Yeah.
But, you know, here's my question. Can any of these candidates get any of the 27 million Hispanics who will vote next year, or they're registered to vote, when they are so xenophobic?
I think I blame Donald Trump for this. I think that Trump is and this is my personal opinion, I think Trump is volcanically spicy in terms of what he wants to say. He wants to stir the troubled pot. He wants to get stuff out there. But then Mark and I were talking before we got on the show about how Ted Cruz went to some local megachurch and was saying some pretty outrageous things. And then they want to call out Marco Rubio for his 2013 stance in terms of amnesty for the immigrants. You can still appeal to the minority voters out there, and you can still appeal to the minority voters who are descendants of immigrants. I don't think that the Republican Party has alienated itself from that voting base. I think to do so would be shortchanged and short-sighted in terms of their ability to call to the people. But they have a lot of repair.
They have a lot of repair work to do here. I mean, first, this happens in every election, Tiffany. We know Democrats, generally go to the left. Look at what Bernie Sanders has made Hillary Clinton do, and the Republicans go to the right to reach their base.
Well, they've gone far, further than I would have expected them to go so soon. I think that the facts are just so not there in terms of the substance of what they're saying. They have a lot of sound bites that are really good, but if you get into the substance of what they're planning or the substance of what they are using to support their arguments, it kind of falls away. And that's different than in the past, although I think that, in the prior election cycle with Mitt Romney, you saw a little bit of that as well, but it's just really rampant in the way that they're talking about the issues this time.
Well, don't underestimate our nation's long history in talking about immigration and immigrants and wanting to have a more restrictionist policy. It's happened. But also don't underestimate the fact that the Republicans are speaking to a broad swath of society, because in the end, there are a lot of people who can't get jobs. And when you hear, oh, we need to get more immigrants in to take these jobs that aren't filled, well, there's a lot of people who probably
They're going to resent that.
Right. There's a lot of people who want those jobs who could get them. If immigration can be turned into a successful jobs argument, I don't think it's going to be so toxic for the Republicans.
Well, Ted Cruz is doing, I thought, in Orlando, a pretty good job of saying, look, Americans need some of these jobs that immigrants are taking. I thought
Donald Trump says, put a wall up, let me show you how you build it.
I was going to say, I think we actually have that sound to play, yeah. But what I really want to hear, you to listen to, and I really want our audience to hear, is something that happened in the GOP debate in Milwaukee earlier. There was this back and forth between Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio over defense spending and military spending.
Rand Paul, I believe, right?
I'm sorry, Rubio and Rand Paul. Yes, someone mentioned Ted Cruz. I have Ted Cruz on my mind. So Rubio and Rand Paul were going back and forth over spending and talking about military spending and defense spending. And this happened on Tuesday. And I want to listen to it again post-Paris attacks and talk about that a little bit.
I believe the world is a stronger and a better place when the United States is the strongest military power in the world.
Marco, how is it conservative? How is it conservative to add $1 trillion expenditure for the federal government?
So that Tuesday night, that meant one thing. Does it mean another thing today?
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if people know this, but the United States, for NATO, the United States is 75% of the defense spending for NATO. So in light of what's happened, in light of Article 5, which a lot of people are not talking about, but I think that they are going to, especially in terms of the presidential candidates.
They started this morning.
It's a one for all for one. That's the exact idea. This Article 5 of the NATO treaty basically says, you attack one of us in the alliance, you've attacked all of us in the alliance. And I think the United States, seeing how it has 75% of the military defense spend for NATO, needs to do something.
All right, well, the question of the moment, and I think for the next months, maybe years, is going to be, how do you attack ISIS? It's not a state entity, and yet you've got the attack on France. France is a member of NATO. How do we respond?
Well, I don't want to be a warmonger, but at the same time, I do understand where the criticisms of President Obama have been, in that he has not, he rightfully, after our Iraq war folly, or adventures, if you will, addressed a war-weary nation and followed through with his campaign promise to withdraw from Iraq.
Right.
But the problem you've had in Europe is that as ISIS has destabilized both Syria and Iraq and caused a massive refugee crisis, Germany, France, and these other nations have not done anything about it. And at a certain point, they're going to have to step up and lead, or perhaps they're waiting for us to lead, and no one's doing it. And I think this is a big opening.
We have the G20 right now, though, so maybe they're going to make a decision
talking
now.
about
but
it
I also
this
think
weekend.
this is another opening for these Republican candidates to make that case, but it's tricky.
Well, it's also an opening for our current president, because the day before the attacks, he said we'd contain ISIS. An unfortunate statement to make right before
that timing was
the
impeccable.
attacks happened. So we have to reassess, we have to reevaluate, and we have to come forward with a proactive strategy.
As we heard last night, we don't need to contain ISIS, we need to destroy them.
They're going to destroy us if we don't.
Well, and exactly, that's what Hillary Clinton said, and it's going to be a the topic, I think, for this presidential election.
Yes.
Katie Fang, Tiffany Lee, and Mark Caputo. Great to have you come in. What a good discussion.
Thanks.
All right, still to come, my personal perspective about the attacks in Paris.
And this is what it looks like from our Hollywood beach cam. Kind of a gloomy day, but beautiful in its own way.
And with the professional forecast about what you're looking at, let's go to Weather Authority meteorologist Jennifer Correa. Jennifer, good morning.
Good morning, or actually good afternoon, Michael and Glenna. It's already the afternoon hours. I can't believe it. And the winds have been kicking up. We're talking about 18-mile-per-hour winds in Fort Lauderdale, anywhere between 15 to up to 20 today out of the east-northeast. Wind gusts up to 25 miles per hour in Fort Lauderdale, but wind gusts reported all across South Florida. So it is definitely a windy day for us, and also gloomy out there, not allowing temperatures to warm up much, but we do see some 80 degrees out there. If not, we're in the upper 70s, and that's how it will stay for the rest of the afternoon. We still have a couple of showers to deal with as we continue on and into tomorrow morning. Take those umbrellas with you. You will need them once again.
Jennifer, thanks. All right, before we leave you today, a personal perspective about these awful terrorist attacks in Paris. What happened there Friday is horrifying, gruesome, tragic, outrageous. Pick your adjective for acts so vile they defy reason or morality. This, in fact, was completely immoral and unjustifiable. There is no justification for killing innocent people at restaurants, a concert hall, outside a stadium, on the streets. You have to wonder, what did the killers hope to achieve besides publicity and a high body count? What was the point? To show France and the free world that radical jihad can strike back? Well, we learned that lesson years ago. The attack on the USS Cole, on our embassies in Africa. We certainly learned it on 9/11. Radical Islam hates us because of our values, because we embrace diversity, believe in the right of people of all faiths to practice their religion. We believe women have all the rights that men do, including to drive a car, go to school. These are our values, and we are not going to change them because of religious fanatics who want to live as if they are back in the 12th century. We will not change who we are and what we stand for. So, what do free people do now? First, find the perpetrators of these vile acts, punish them by our standards, not by theirs, and that means there could be death penalty, but not by slitting their throats in front of a TV camera. They are barbaric. We cannot be. The response to these evil acts must come from a coalition of free nations led by the ones most at risk: France, Belgium, Germany, Britain, Russia, the U.S., also the more enlightened countries in the Middle East. Let there be a coalition of free people who refuse to be cowed or intimidated by religious fanatics, whether it's ISIS or Al-Qaeda or any radical group that mounts terror attacks like the ones in Paris. ISIS will not be defeated with airstrikes alone. It may well take boots on the ground, and if so, the boots should be from many nations. I think they should start marching soon. That is my perspective today. Our hearts are with Parisians, all the people of France. Nous sommes avec vous. We are with you, France. Remember, stay informed, get involved.
Of course, we'd love to hear what you think on that or anything in the news. Here are all of our addresses. Have a beautiful Sunday and stay tuned for the latest from Paris.